All right. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. It is March 29th, 2024, and I'm uploading a podcast that I have found in my Google Drive that said it was last modified May 17th, 2017. So it's a podcast I don't remember doing. It may be up forever. I may have to take it down out of courtesy because I have no clue who I did it with. I've gone through my emails, I've gone through a few Google searches, but apparently it was called DC Through the Ages, which I don't know if that was the name of the show or if that was the title of the episode. And I remember the era that I probably did this because things were changing on YouTube, things were changing with the hobby, and my channel, it kind of peaked a little bit, at the time. A few great years on there. And then when I felt things were changing and we were on the cusp of things like Comicsgate and things that's old news now, but this was when it was just happening and things were just starting. I was experimenting with other things to do, thinking that, I'd been on YouTube long enough. And due to the atmosphere of what was going on with comics, it was going more towards drama, and it was less about the comics, is what I'm trying to get at. And I knew my audience pretty well, and some of them said they were just sort of out, shut down some channels, and moved on. So I was kind of playing around with what else we could do because I'm still jacked about this hobby. And I ended up playing around with podcasts. I was on quite a few podcasts, and I was still going from comic book conventions and maybe a few schools doing panels talking about comics and stuff. Dublin, the New River comic book convention that was going on in Dublin, Virginia. A few in Roanoke, down in North Carolina, two or three schools over the years. Just having a blast with this stuff, and I was having a good time with the podcasting stuff. So what would happen is I would do a podcast, and then somebody on the panel would also have their own podcasting show, and they would invite me on. So I ended up I remember I did about 10 in about 3 months. So the one you're about to listen to, I've listened to it a little bit. I hope you enjoy it. There's some issues with the sound. And also, it was a 2.5 hours, and I'm just uploading about an hour and 12 minutes. Maybe there'll be a part 2. And I'm not quite sure everything that's in there, so enjoy. And for you guys that are visual, if you want to play around, I've got 2-3 videos on there, no sound. You'll see what I'm saying. Take up, to kind of give you something to look at. I have 2-3 videos I pulled off the phone that I never uploaded for various reasons. The Star Wars one, you'll see there's a lot of glare and stuff from the lights. Concert footage, stuff where I went kayaking down in the Carolinas. Just all kinds of stuff in there to play around with and stuff. So enjoy. Go back in time. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you don't like it. I think I got a kick out of it. I got a kick out of it watching it because I have zero memory of ever doing it. So later, guys.
All right, cool. You got it recorded
Yeah, it's going, man.
in the sound waves.
Yeah, we got sound waves. Yep.
All right, cool, awesome. We'll do 5 seconds of silence and then I'll get us started here. Hello and welcome to DC Through the Ages. I'm Tom Adonis. I'm here with Tim, aka Howler Mouse. If you listen to one of our previous episodes, I think it was random episode 4, he came on and we did a little comic chat, and he's joining me here today for our all new DC podcast where we'll be covering DC Rebirth and DC Comics from the 1930s all the way to now. Every episode's going to be a little bit different. I think it's going to be quite a bit of a change from our other comic book podcast shows that we do. So I'm really excited about it. Tim, thank you for joining me again. I'm really been looking forward to this all week, man.
Oh yeah, man. I've been prepping for this. This is going to be good. This is going to be good.
So yeah, we picked some interesting titles for you guys to cover. I know we've always been kind of Marvel heavy podcasts. We've done our fair share of independent comics. I mean, really, really independent stuff, and then also our Image and Dynamite, Boom, Valiant, and stuff like that. But Joe and John and I have very limited DC knowledge. I grew up being a huge fan of the X-Men and the X-Men cartoon show, and that's kind of what drew me into comics. I always liked Batman, but just every time I tried to get into the DC universe, it was just a bad time for a new reader, I think, to try to get on, and it just didn't work out. So, but when DC Rebirth launched, I gave it an honest chance. I picked up a very, very large majority of the comics that came out, and I've been really enjoying them. I've been broadcasting that through Twitter, and a lot of our listenership and followers on Twitter seem to agree with me. And we've always gotten a lot of emails. Why don't you guys do more DC stuff? And that's kind of been the reason why. It's just we haven't been comfortable handling the material. But Tim here has been reading comics a lot longer than I have, and definitely a lot longer than Joe and John. And you've read DC for quite some time, right, Tim?
Yeah, at least since '77. Not to give a big bio here, but I started reading 1977 when I was 4 years old, because I had an uncle and a stepdad who had this stuff all over the place. And of course, we had Super Friends on Saturday mornings, Batman on Saturday mornings, reruns of Adventures of Superman, Batman '66, Wonder Woman, The Incredible Hulk, and the Superman movie came out. I did not stand a chance,
Right, yeah. You were engulfed in the culture.
Right.
But, yeah. But, so when Tim and I ended up interacting online, and he agreed to come on the podcast last time, we got to talking, and I felt like he'd be a great addition to add to the Pencil and Ink reviews crew, and to try to kind of restructure and kind of rethink the whole DC podcast. And we came up with this idea of DC Through the Ages, and just I don't know, just having kind of a more relaxed approach to what we're going to be covering, and not being so stringent of like starting at the beginning and then working our way to where the companies currently are. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're definitely going to be trying to go through the DC Rebirth stuff as it came out during the weeks, but I think the fun part of the podcast will be just jumping all over the place with maybe important storylines, or like critical moments in characters' histories that are important to the DC universe. And I'm going to be asking Tim for a lot of advice on what we should cover going forward. I picked the comics this week, just fair warning.
it was a good selection. It ended up painting a very nice picture. It's okay. Yeah.
So we're going to be covering Action Comics #1, Superman's first appearance, Detective Comics 27, which is Batman's first appearance. We're going to cover the first ever Justice League of America issue from 1960. And then we're going to jump into some Rebirth stuff. We're going to cover one New 52 title. It's the last Justice League by Jeff Johns, Justice League number 50, which kind of ties right into the first DC Rebirth issue. That was kind of, I guess I would say, revealing kind of where the company was heading and where the universe was heading, right, Tim? It was like kind of like a sneak peek into what you were going to be buying as a DC reader for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. It did a couple things on that DC Rebirth. It was definitely laying the groundwork for what at the time was going to be the next 2 years, and we're getting close to a year into it. So yeah, I've got some thoughts about that when we get there. So
right. Okay. Cool. And then we're gonna do Superman Rebirth #1, and then Batman Rebirth #1. And I thought doing the first issue of your first appearance of Batman and Superman, and then also doing the first appearance of or the first issue of Rebirth Superman and Batman was a good, I don't know, parody. So that was the reasoning behind that. So
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, man. Yeah,
so
getting a little history in there on the characters to see where they're at now is really good. It's always a good idea.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and it's always fun to kind of see how comics were presented in the different decades. And definitely the 30s comics are really different even from like the 50s and 60s comics.
yeah.
So I was kind of surprised by some of the things that took place in those comics, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And yeah, so I don't know. What are you feeling like jumping into first, Tim? You want to?
Well, I'm kind of a little bit of a historian on the comics and stuff. So, reading Action Comics #1 and the first appearance of Batman and stuff, I said we start at the beginning.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, and I'll try to stay on topic, man. So you rein me in, like I said before. Yeah. So,
Well, I think yeah, Action Comics came out first, right before Detective Comics 27.
yeah, 1938. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess we can start with that. Now I read this last month, so I kind of skimmed through it for the podcast. This is the only one that I skimmed, but you read through it because you were going to kind of present it to our listeners. So I'll let you kind of run with it for a bit. I'll just chime in as I follow along with you or follow
Oh,
the
that's cool,
discussion.
man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Action Comics #1 was a bit more of an anthology series. The Superman comic in there, if it ran, I don't know, 6 pages, I'd be surprised. And it had some other characters in there like Butch Madston, Chuck Dawson, the first appearance of Zatara, who became he was like a Mandrake clone. If you follow, you know those characters that hung out with Defenders of the Earth in the '80s. So it had,
Okay.
it was crime stories, a little magic in there. They were all adventures, and they all felt like '30s serials, that
Yeah, a
came on. Yeah,
little Western theater
yeah,
here going. Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, but front and center was Superman, and yeah,
Just out of curiosity, Superman started as a newspaper comic, right? So are these panels from the newspaper, and then they just got colored in and compiled into the Action Comics number one,
Well,
or
well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna go with a grain of salt on what I'm about to say, but they tried to sell him as a comic strip. Now, I don't think it ever went through because this is the recognized first appearance of Superman that everybody pays over $1 million for if they want a copy.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
they shopped him around for a while, and the thing about that first story of Superman is that this is the '30s, and these were the guys that were sort of making up the rules. They somebody just a few years before this. Oh my God, I'm going blank. It was the dad of the guy that ran Kurtzman, a guy named Kurtzman. His son ended up running EC Comics and Mad Magazine. But anyway, they were, somebody figured out how to just kind of fold some paper, and that's where the comic book came from. It was from comic strips. Everybody wanted to be a comic strip, artist. And
right,
the stuff they pulled from is when you get into the history of comics, that's where you got to kind of rein me in. But anyway, what they did is they came out and it's just, they were kind of making up the rules of comics, and the storytelling process was real new with this. But they effectively, in one page, gave you a simple origin and an explanation of his powers, and then moved on with the story. You know,
right, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's a very quick uh, presentation of like where he came from, what his powers are,
yeah.
and then they jump right into a story as
And
him as an adult,
yeah, and strangely enough, the first thing they say is like his planet grew old and it blew up, and then by the time you get to the panel, they're trying to give you like this easily understandable scientific reason why he has super strength. Originally, the Kryptonians just evolved where they had super strength, and
Right,
they said if you don't believe that, look what we have on planet Earth, and they give you ants and
right,
grasshoppers.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I
yeah.
see that.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of one of the reasons I kind of love the history of comics. Going all the way back, even though we have more sophisticated writing, better art, all sorts of things like that, they knew how to inform and catch up readers better than they do today, which you just kind of stated at the beginning of the podcast about having a hard place to jump in to DC Comics.
Yeah.
Back then, they had the mindset that, and this is one thing I'll give Stan Lee credit for. You know, you have to look at a comic that this is somebody's first comic when you're a writer. I think.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's something that they did really well up until a certain point, and then I guess for the sake of the sanity of the long-term readers, they decided to stop explaining what the team was about or what the character was about and what powers they had. You know, like when you opened up an issue of Uncanny X-Men from, I don't know, 120 to, you know, all the way maybe, I don't know, somewhere in the 90s, you got an explanation of who the character was and what their powers was and what the X-Men were all about. Nowadays, you open it up, maybe you'll get like a page where you'll have every character represented that's going to be in the comic, and you'll get one word or two words about what their power is, and then
yeah.
maybe a small paragraph of like the current storyline. So and sometimes you don't even get that with some other books. And one of the things that I think that Image really needs to start doing is putting a recap in the front of their books. They're not doing that.
Right.
And I think that's really hurting them. Because, yeah, you get that initial readership that jumps on the book in the beginning, but then, you know, people hear about it if it's a good comic, but then they go to the stand and they flip through it and they go, oh, this is pretty cool, but then they don't know, you know, they don't really know what the comic's about, or, you know, they got to go on Google or whatever to figure it out. So
Oh yeah.
it is different. It's different, you know. It's a different time.
Yeah,
But
yeah. And what another way to do that is like when I said you pick these books out, Rebirth actually kind of went back to that. When Action Comics was when you read Action Comics, Lois Lane ends up being sort of like the reader, like she represents us. There's a
right,
famous panel there that Alex Ross actually repainted, where it's the first time Superman met Lois, and he looks at her and says, you don't need to be afraid of me. I'm not going to hurt you." That's actually it's kind of like Doctor Who. The reason Doctor Who has a companion is so he can explain things to her, so the reader the audience understands.
right.
And actually, when we get to like DC's Rebirth and the Superman Rebirth, they bring back that technique. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I've noticed that because I've been buying all the Superman titles, family titles, except I think I dropped Supergirl after the first story arc. And not that it was a bad comic, I liked it. It's just that I just can't afford
right.
to buy all these comics
Yeah,
at full price. So, um,
yeah. But that's the magic of some of the books you picked. It shows a difference what happens when a writer puts in the account of having a character in there just to have a reason story wise to explain things to the reader without them even knowing that's what they're doing. You know.
right. Yeah. Would you say everyone says that Superman is like the first superhero, right? But
In pop culture, yeah,
in
yeah.
pop culture, but I mean, I think Buck Rogers was 10 years older, right? It was 1929, and but that was a newspaper comic.
Yeah, that was a newspaper comic, and I actually read those. I had a hardback book that reprinted those. And
I have the
those,
same book.
yeah,
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 it's big, right? It's a
right,
big
right.
hardcover book. Yeah.
And it takes place in the 20s, you know. And you had Flash Gordon, and actually in the Detective comic first appearance of Batman that we'll talk about in a minute, had the Crimson Avenger. The Crimson Avenger actually predated Superman in DC Comics. I don't know by how long, but this was back in the day where you just had a suit, a hat, and a domino mask, and you know you had
Right.
your guns and stuff. So, you know, so what Superman did is he added the sci-fi element to the comics is what he did. I mean, you know, we had space stories like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, but then all of a sudden, you know, when it came to the genre of actual superhero, that's what Superman did. It was heavy sci-fi. You know, it was new. It was science fiction. You also got to remember this is around the time where we had War of the Worlds with, you know, that radio broadcast. I
Right.
cannot believe I'm forgetting his name. You know,
Orson.
Orson Welles and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, you know, we were getting into the sci-fi part of it. They were pulling from the movies. They were pulling for radio broadcast, and you know, it was still a time of imagination. You know.
If I remember correctly, when that radio broadcast happened, didn't a lot of people think it was really happening?
Yeah, people committed suicide. They thought that
Oh, okay.
they thought it was going on, and that's why they started having during the commercials and breaks, letting everybody know it's a disclaimer that this is a play. Right.
Um,
Much like everybody believes everything, well, not everybody, but much like a lot of people believe everything they read on the internet. It's just
or everything you hear on TV.
yeah, nature of the beast. It's always been, there you go. Yeah, that's a whole different topic. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole.
right. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. History repeats itself, and if comics are a tool where you can see that, So yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I liked about this first comic book, first appearance of Superman was, and I mean, I don't know, he's like an everyday man. I mean, it's like in some ways, and then in other ways, he's this super being. But he's taking on like real world problems. He's not fighting some sci-fi,
Right.
Villain. He's taking on crooks. He's taking on
A corrupt
corrupt
politician,
politicians,
yeah, who sleep.
landlords.
See, yeah, and that's why it cracked me up because,
He's
like,
a populist. Yeah, he's a populist. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, he busts into the governor's house, who's corrupt because he's trying to keep this guy from getting electrocuted. The man is he's going to be in the electric chair at midnight, and he's trying to hurry up and tell the governor that he's innocent. And he busts into this house, then he goes upstairs, and the guy just happens to have a steel door so he can sleep. And I'm sitting here like, I'm like reading that like paranoia. We have, in today's standards, we're willing to know that this guy is like mentally ill on top of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can respect this stuff, but there's stuff you can still kind of laugh at,
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, it's weird because this is before the Comics Code Authority. So right.
Yeah.
And so we'll get into that with Batman.
Yes.
A little bit, but there's an innocence to these comics and some simplistic aspects, and yeah, they're meant for kids, but there's some dark stuff in some of these books, and
Yeah.
and in some ways they're a little bit more mature than the comics from the 60s and 70s. Well, not the 70s, but it's the 60s where that Comic Code Authority has a heavy hand and is kind of really censoring like everything.
Yeah.
They're having to find ways around that, and that brings a whole sense of or like a feeling of like, I mean, you get like it's fun to see how they try to work around that to appeal to older readers, and you get some really cool stuff from them trying to do that. But this is interesting as well, and one of the things that Joe always felt that if we jumped into these 1930s books that they would be like way too childish and like way
Nah.
too way too hard to read, because a lot of the books have deteriorated so much. When they're scanned in, they don't look that great.
Well-
I didn't find it that hard to read, and I found it interesting enough where it kept my attention.
Well, what we have is we live in a great time, and I feel like I grew up in a great time, reading these comics, 70s and stuff. There was a history before it, stuff was going on, and now we're moving forward. When you read books from the 30s and 40s, you got to get in the mindset of what the world was like. The mature themes. Okay, first of all, the comics were entertainment. Second of all, it was a different time because people grew up a lot quicker back then, and reality was more in their face. I mean, this is during the Depression. People were struggling. The character of this tells you the character of the people at the time to come out of that, with World War II.
That's why I felt like it was worth diving into these books, because I was like, these people got so much going on. World War II, the Depression, people starving, people lining up at soup kitchens, the stock market crash.
And they were looking for a little bit of escapism, but they didn't. Judging by these books, of course, we weren't there. But I grew up around people who. Were still alive in the 70s and 80s that were in that era, and there's just a character to them to where they know what it's like not to have a lot, and they still kept their dignity. You know what I mean? They had a little bit of they had an edge to them of like, you better, they want to see, you got to kind of prove yourself, or you're a worker. And then they also had a little bit of a compassion because they knew what it felt like to have nothing. But they went on with life. They were upbeat. and they grew up a lot quicker back then. This is before you had laws protecting children from work. They would send kids down into machines in factories and stuff, and kids would lose fingers and stuff because they were small. This is also why when Batman got Robin, it was believable. You know, at the time, but you didn't worry about abuse and neglect and stuff. Some people would be out in the farm working when they were 6 years old.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there were men who would, to make money, they would take their sons out to the cities, and they would have like these UFC fights in a back alley with a circle of people betting on whose kid's going to beat up who. I mean, it was a rough time.
Yeah.
But to them it was normal. Yeah, there's a wrestler named Fritz von Erich. That's how his dad did him. That's where you got the von Erich family. Yeah.
Me and John are big.
Yeah.
We used to be big wrestling fans. John still watches Monday Night Raw, and I think he has like a little wrestling podcast that he does. I stopped watching wrestling like in '99, 2000. I got briefly back into it in like '06. But not enough to order any pay-per-views. But I definitely know who the Von Erichs are. Yeah.
I'm at the end of that kind of era where people did that. I got into wrestling, and I think it's hilarious, But I've kind of watched where I told this story. But when I was like 5 or 6, we moved to what I found out was the ghetto of the town I lived in. I didn't know it. I'm all little 5-year-old kid, all happy, the sun's shining, let's all play, get on our bikes, and then I started getting beat up by 3 or 4 kids. My stepdad set me in front of the TV, and I watched Kevin Sullivan turn heel, and I went, "Oh, I got it!" And then I went out and beat up this guy named Paul who'd beat me up.
That's awesome.
There's more to the story. My little brother was still in diapers, and when I had the guy in the camel clutch, and he had a little bit of blood coming out of his mouth, my little brother in diapers is sitting there getting in his face with the finger, going, "You want some more? You want some more?" It was bad.
It's like a scene out of Monday Night Raw, man.
Right. This was like 1979, 1980. So yeah. That's what you did back then.
I think Monday Night Raw first episode was '93, and so back when you were a kid, it was probably something else.
It was Saturday mornings. It came on at 9. You had TBS. You had Mid Atlantic. We got Memphis every now and then. I ended up getting into it. I mean, I watched it, but I didn't like it until it clicked with me what was going on here. Their storytelling. I didn't know, and you still had that idea of like, this has got to be fake, but they did such a good job. It was just enough to keep you interested, like you didn't know. But the first thing I remember watching was Freebirds and Junkyard Dog with the Freebird cream, and they blinded them.
Yeah, it's tough. I listen to Jim Cornette a lot talk about wrestling.
I do too.
On YouTube, yeah. And how you can't put the genie back in the bottle, and it's a weird time for wrestling, and I know the ratings haven't been great, so for me it's just tough because it's tough when it's like almost the same problem that I had when I tried to jump into DC Comics back in like 2003, and then I think I tried again back when everybody thought Batman was dead, and Dick had taken over being Batman, and Damian Wayne was the new Robin and stuff, and I was digging that, and then all of a sudden Grant Morrison lost me, which whenever you're reading anything from Grant Morrison, that can happen. But
I mean, I'm trying to stay on track with the books we said we were going to review, but Grant Morrison, and this isn't really taken up for him, but Grant Morrison knows his history of DC Comics, and he went so far deep into Batman's history from the Silver Age and in the Bronze Age both, that if you didn't know the history of Batman, you're sitting there going, what the hell is he doing?
Exactly, and then he lost me. I think I bought the first 9 or 10 issues, and then I ended up dropping it because I didn't know what was going on.
Right, and me being me, Morrison did stuff that I knew where he was pulling from, and I forget that people haven't really had time or the resources to dig into Batman's back issues like he has.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's what, 900 issues or something?
Yeah,
It's a lot.
There actually used to be an ad for the Justice League in the 70s comics, and it was just a circle of heads of the Justice League, and they miscolored the Atom. They didn't put the blue in his mask, and he was white. And when Grant Morrison did a Justice League story called Rock of Ages, he had the Atom with white in his outfit, and I knew that's where he got it from.
See, I love that kind of stuff, and I never had a problem with his X-Men run, and I really liked it, except for the fact that he killed Magneto, but and then they retconned it, but yeah, I mean, he's a great writer, but
Yeah.
I had the same problem with wrestling. It's like I've been out of it for so long. When I try to jump in, I just don't know what the hell is going on.
Well, I've given up on wrestling for years, but I'll check in. But what's happening is I like there's certain wrestlers that I individually like because they've got that spark. Bullet Club kind of brought me back. I try to look up stuff from New Japan, NJWP, I think. And if there's a Bullet Club member, like the Hardy Boys fought the Young Bucks the night before WrestleMania, and I was able to watch that online, and I could not believe that after the match they had with the tables and ladders and chairs, and it was a good match. It wasn't perfect. They went out on Raw the very next night and had another unbelievable match where I don't know how these guys are walking, you know.
I think I remember that WrestleMania. Didn't they get up on some really freaking tall ladders and go through some tables and stuff?
I had to read a recap on it because they haven't put it online yet. I'm a guy that I will not spend money on this because, like, I would have watched I would have watched the Hardy. I mean, I'm not a fanboy for them, but I respect I respect the hell out of them because they respect.
Those guys,
Yeah,
those guys were crazy.
they respect the fans, and and you can feel that. You know, I mean, that is important. You know what I mean? They're not just calling it in, man. They love what they're doing. They're going for it. Thank God for YouTube because that's where I get my wrestling. I got to watch the entire Broken Matt Hardy saga. Some fan put together an hour and a half clip movie from TNA, and that's how I got caught up on the Hardys. And I'm like, this is genius, you know.
I'll have to check that out.
If it's still up, you got to be quick with the YouTube wrestling because people they pull it, man. But sorry, man, I'm veering off here. Sorry.
We'll get back into the Superman. So yeah, I think we were getting into like we were just generally discussing the comic, but yeah, I mean this was cool. Obviously, there's the iconic panel of him lifting the old style 1930s vehicle over his head and everybody running away and stuff.
Yeah, and it amazes because for years, it kind of there's little things as you collect over the years where you can kind of tell the people how long they've collected. There was a big mystery on the cover of Action Comics #1. Of course, the cover is Superman lifting the vehicle, and at the very bottom, I guess left-hand corner, there's a guy with his hands on his head screaming.
Yeah.
If you read the book, you see who that is. That's the guy that kidnapped Lois and pissed Superman off, and that's why. Yeah. But what I liked about it is that little things that made these characters humans was if you read the book, the bunch of thugs have Lois in the car. Superman's standing in front of the car, and instead of taking them out then, he runs over the car like Michael Myers did in Halloween. And he runs on top of the car, jumps down, chases them, and then lifts it off. Like he was messing with them. You know, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah.
One thing that people probably who maybe never read Superman before, maybe they're only like Marvel people, is like this Superman is a little bit different than the Superman of today. He doesn't fly.
No.
He has super strength, super speed. He's able to jump real high and all that, but he's not flying around. There's no mention of kryptonite yet or anything like that. So
yeah, that stuff would come years later through the radio show and through a few comics. You know, Superman got retconned and from the Fleischer cartoons. So it was sort of like Superman was, you know, a money market. I mean, let's face it. So everybody added a little bit to it, and they were fine refining him.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they had big corporate meetings or anything like that, but everything kind of stayed canon. The introduction of Krypton and stuff, to me, is where he really took off. Jimmy Olsen came from the radio show, a lot of things. The Fleischer cartoons, to me, are the purest Superman, you know.
I wonder if there's anywhere you can like listen to those old Superman radio shows.
Oh.
Like if they have them uploaded anywhere.
Oh yeah, there's a couple sites that do that, but basically, again, YouTube. You can get on YouTube and find all sorts of old movie serials and radio programs. I listen to Vincent Price CBS radio shows regularly and stuff. I listen to that stuff at night, you know, while I'm reading.
Vincent Price is awesome.
Yeah, but I've heard the radio shows and stuff, man, and like you know if you like The Shadow, I mean, there was definitely a formula, you know, and the best ones to me are the ones that keep the commercials in, you know.
Okay. Yeah. They don't cut them out.
Right. Yeah.
I'm the same way when I watch something from the 80s that maybe my parents recorded on VHS or some sort of sporting event. I love watching the old commercials. I don't know why. They just crack me up. I think I was watching maybe like a old Indianapolis 500 from like the 80s or something like that, late 80s. And Joey from Friends was in a Sprite commercial.
Yeah.
That's so funny, like hilarious stuff like that. Or like just the old car commercials and stuff like that. And I don't know, they crack me up. So I've always been a fan of that.
Yeah, it's all fun, man. It was like entertaining, and some of the stuff you can like, you end up feeling like you're a little bit of a cult for the appreciation sometimes. It's definitely a niche, but that's the fun of it. If people gave it a chance and they can find something they'll enjoy with all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in this comic, Lois gets kidnapped. He goes after the criminals. He gives them a real hard time. And then I think the issue kind of ends with him. Was it in this issue he was taking on the dirty politicians, or that story was kind of just starting? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, it kind of gave me the feeling there was no real cliffhanger there. It was.
Well, that's the thing with these older issues. They didn't do the cliffhanger thing. Even in the '60s, when you're reading a lot of the Jack Kirby, Stan Lee stuff, it's all one-shot stories.
Well, yeah, where action was, there was one or two stories in there that did have to be continued.
Oh, okay.
But basically it was moving forward. I mean, you understand this thing. The comics back then were considered disposable, not collectibles.
Right. Yeah, kids used to just throw them out, right? Or trade them for other books or whatever.
Yeah, and then later on, somebody, I guess it was C.C. Beck, and anybody can correct me on this and stuff, but one of the things they've never collected, and if they have, I missed it because they've been trying for years. Roy Thomas is a guy who's really pushed for it. But the Monster Society, that was a story that went, I think, over 12 issues back then, where the main plot was who's organizing all these villains and stuff to come after Shazam, Captain Marvel, and it ended up being Mr. Mind. That's how Mr. Mind was introduced. And I've never read it, but I heard it is supposed to be glorious, and you could not believe that it was from the 40s.
Really? Oh, that'd be cool. I have to get my hands on that. It's tough. Sometimes it's hard to find this stuff online.
Yeah. But that's what I mean about the comics. You kind of end up painting a picture there and stuff like.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a good way to segue from Superman to Batman if you want to move on to detectives.
Yeah, Detective Comics. I love this cover too. He's got him in the he's got the criminal in the headlock, and he's swinging on the grappling hook. It's a great cover.
Yeah, and in that Batman book, a lot of people. I just watched a half of a documentary called Batman and Bob, where it's revealed that Batman and Bill Finger was the real creator of Batman, more or less, instead of Bob Kane. But they talk about all the influences that led to Batman, like Zorro and a few other things, and there's been like a little bit of a debate, at least there was back in the day, if Batman was just a reaction to Superman. He's the opposite of Superman.
He is very mysterious and dark, and it's definitely not the Batman that maybe people were accustomed to when the TV show, the live-action TV show, where it's a little bit more campy and corny. This is some dark stuff. And it's nice to see that the character has its roots in that, and not the more campy stuff that I don't know, a lot of maybe generic people who aren't reading comics and just know Batman from pop culture. Maybe they associate him more with that campy version of the TV show, or like the Mr. Freeze Batman movie.
Oh yeah, the '60s and stuff, and to before getting into him there with how he was in his debut, but this shows the strength of Batman. Batman is such a strong character. He's very versatile, and they've done some stuff that at the time might have been eye-rolling and stuff, but Batman survives, and it always seems to work. I mean, I'm trying to sit here and think of a story or something where they really ripped it. They went too far with Batman, and really, honestly, not really. There's like different Batman that everybody has their Batman, and they all sort of work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no problem with the campy version of Batman was fun.
Yeah.
And I used to watch the reruns of the '60s TV show when I was a kid, and I loved it. I do. I think my personality generally drifts towards more of the darker stuff. I love the modern interpretation that. What was the director's name? They did the last three
Nolan.
Batman movies.
Nolan. Yeah.
Nolan. Yeah. Nolan, I thought, did a wonderful job with those three Batman movies. Very realistic take on Batman.
Yeah. And the magic of those, to me, all that versatility and different interpretation of Batman has just been one of those things that's helped him survive. But the smart people always remember where he came from. Nolan pulled from Frank Miller's Dark Knight and, beginning of Batman, and Dark Knight pulled from this Detective comic, his first appearance, because what people have, it just amazes me that nobody has really pointed out until the Tim Burton Batman movie that Batman's killed before. And the first issue, a guy gets dumped into a vat of acid that just, I guess in the 30s, you just had a vat of acid lying around no matter what.
Well,
yeah.
I think it was in a factory.
Yeah.
In this first issue of Batman, we see that Bruce Wayne's just chilling with
Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, and then I loved it that they're both smoking pipes.
Yeah. And where you pick this stuff out, I told you it painted a picture for me. Well, if you go back and read The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, the first time Batman and Gordon are together, if I'm remembering right, is they're sitting there, chilling out over dinner, smoking a pipe.
Yeah, right.
Cigars. Yeah.
I read that the first part of that, and I think you're right. I think I remember that clearly. Them smoking the pipe. Yeah, it was great.
Cigars or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something. They were definitely enjoying a nice tobacco product.
So there's Bruce Wayne and Commissioner Gordon at the beginning of Batman's career, more or less, and then in Dark Knight Returns we have them at the end of Commissioner Gordon's career is about the end because he's going to retire. It's nice little. That's why I love comics. You find things that complete a story that you didn't know that are outside of it. So.
Right. So basically, what happens in this comic is Commissioner Gordon gets a call. There's been a murder, and as the mystery unfolds, we see that all these murder victims are part of this company, and it looks as if there's one of the partners is murdering the other partners because he wants full control of the company. If I understood that right.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, it was actually half of the word balloons were blurry on the link you sent me. The thing. Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah. Thank God somebody was able to scan this and put it out there so that this stuff. I wonder sometimes if even DC themselves have this material, somewhere stored, because like you said, back then they weren't collectibles. This stuff went out into the public. It was bought, and then it was a lot of them recycled it for the paper for the war effort, or they just got tossed out, and I wonder sometimes how much how much DC even has, the company itself of their own material from this time period, So it's tough to get good high quality scans of this stuff for sure. Yeah, definitely.
But what they did is in a comic book, good storytelling. You don't need the word balloons if the artist has done their job. You can follow what's going on. So yeah.
Enough said.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what they still did. Be it Bob Kane that drew that, or Bill Finger, or one of the ghost artists and stuff. It actually, to me, and this is being critical. This is not taken away from Siegel and Schuster and stuff. But the Batman book with the coloring, it was just it just had better storytelling in it. It was more dynamic. You could tell what was going on even without those word balloons. So if it wasn't blurry, it's not something I would have thought about at the time, But that's just it. Batman's dynamic in there. He's throwing some freaking punches. You can feel the hate he has for evil.
He's brutal.
Yeah. It's a brutal thing, man. And he's wearing purple gloves,
He has a very wrestler-like approach to taking these criminals on.
Yeah.
He's headlocking them, almost looks like he's suplexing this other guy.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, even the people who when I was growing up, like the stepdad I talk about and stuff like that. I mean, he would sit there and he would actually get a little direct and raise his voice a little bit. And he's like, people don't know Batman and Superman. They used to drop people off the sides of buildings. I've never seen the book where Superman did that, but I know they've let people die before. You know.
Well, maybe we'll get to it, but definitely in this issue when Batman gets his hands on the murderer.
Yeah.
I mean, the murderer comes at him with a knife and stuff, but still, I mean, he whips his ass and then sends him over a guard railing in this factory into a vat of acid, like you said earlier. And that dude is he's just dissolved.
And
he's dead.
yeah, and Batman says something like, "Well, good, that's what he gets. You know,
Yeah,
he deserves it."
He has no remorse at all. He doesn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Guy deserved it, you know?
Yeah, and walks on.
And that's the thing that in today in DC Comics, I feel that don't you feel like that a lot of times it seems like they try to go out of their way to say that Batman doesn't kill, or maybe I'm wrong. Am I wrong? I mean,
No, they get into the gun thing, and it's everybody trying to do their interpretation of Batman. I'm sure there's some decision making that we are either imagining or we don't know about. But yeah, you're right. There's always been a thing about he has a code of not killing. He hates guns. Everybody always tries to go back, just like with Superman, and either add to the origin or pull something else from it. And this is a conversation we could have for like hours. You know what I mean? It's really hard to bottom line it. Somebody listening is going to be like, "But wait a minute," and they're probably right. You know, that's what I mean. He's such a good character.
he's not the Punisher,
Right.
but and then yeah, definitely he doesn't like guns. Let's say he has this thing about guns, and because his parents were murdered by a criminal with a gun, but if someone really deserves it, if they're a murderer, to me, Batman doesn't have any hesitation. You know, if he has to, he's going to put the guy down. You know, and that's exactly what he does in this first issue.
Yeah.
So, to me, if I was running Batman, if there was some heinous criminal or horrible character, I don't see why he would hesitate to put them down. Like, you know, and that's the thing with the Joker. I know it's his arch nemesis, but it makes you wonder why he you know, he goes light on him sometimes and just turns him in, you know, to the police. He ends up in Arkham and then he gets out again. But yeah, we'll get into the Joker later because that's kind of a big thing with the Rebirth stuff. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like this first issue. The art's great. Batman definitely looks a lot cooler than how I've seen him drawn later on in between this time period and maybe like, you know, the 70s. You know, his uniform kind of changes, right? It almost becomes a little more blue, and then the mask looks a little different, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. They actually evolved these guys. See, that's the difference between comics now and back then. It feels more organic back then. You know what I mean? It feels like as we're figuring out these characters, and you got these young kids coming in doing comics, they're creating the rules on how to do a comic. You know what I mean? That a lot of people have steered away from or never knew nowadays, in my opinion. And the changes were organic, and it didn't piss people off. You know, they still had a mindset of, you know, this is entertainment, but this is my favorite character. But they always kind of, it just worked. You know what I mean? No matter what they did. And then you got your comic book history gets kind of muddled because you don't know what was the decision and what was some artist writer going back and reinterpreting the character. And for example, the New Frontier. I heard Robin came in because they figured out there was a market of kids, so they gave them a kid superhero. But in New Frontier, Darwin Cook said that Batman never meant to scare kids, and Robin lightened him up. You know what I mean? So when you get a character like Batman, you can talk for hours and hours about this stuff. Like, why did this happen? How did that happen? And Batman is a mythology that comes with a lot of responsibility. You know, I mean, you know.
Yeah. All of this stuff does.
Yeah.
But, yeah, definitely Superman and Batman, just because, you know, we've been around for so long. if I had to write Batman or Superman, I definitely would feel that weight on my shoulders.
Oh God, I wouldn't. I'd be like, let me have him. So,
You want to have at it, huh?
Yeah.
You're ready for it. That's awesome. So yeah, I think the last retro comic we got is the first Justice League issue, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we had another one. And I didn't know this till I actually read this comic, and I guess the first appearance of this team coming together was in Brave and the Bold.
I want to say number 28 off the top of my head, and it has been years since I read that. I'm pretty sure I have it in a reprint in the back of one of these books from the 70s that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But Gardner Fox is the guy who wrote that, I'm pretty sure, man, and he's a great writer. And this is back in the day where you could lay down 10, 15 cents, 12 cents, whatever it was back then, and you got a book in chapters back then. There was like 5 chapters in that Justice League #1 or something.
I mean, this is what, a 10-cent comic, and you get
1960 or something, predated
Yeah.
Fantastic Four.
and you're getting 36. It predates Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the reason why the Fantastic Four happened, right? They started having some real success with the.
Yeah. I've laid off this story a little bit because I cannot get it verified. You know what I mean? Like, if this really happened, you figure somebody would have something more. But of course, they started bringing back, superheroes with DC Showcase. What was it, #4 with the Flash, and gradually, you already had Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman still around, and this was like a gradual thing to where, for whatever reason, they came out with it. Well, supposedly the publisher of DC, the publisher of what became Marvel, I can't remember if they were Timely or Atlas at the time. Anyway, but they were supposedly playing golf, and the one guy looked at the other guy and said, "Yeah, we got this team book, man. It took off. We're actually selling." And they were surprised because it was superheroes who were not that popular anymore. And that's where the Fantastic Four. That's why supposedly the first book from actual rebranded Marvel Comics was a teen book.
Now I've heard this same story on the History Channel's History of Comics, I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Have you seen that?
I've seen a couple of them. I've seen the Unmasked. I'm normally
Yes, Unmasked. That was it. The Unmasked. And I heard them tell that story. And Stan Lee says he kind of verified it, but I don't know if it. Yeah, you never know, right?
Yeah, you got to understand when we hear, and this does not mean they're liars, but you have to understand we hear these stories from storytellers. So they're going to add to it. Their job is to make a dynamic story. I mean, true writing is making a lie believable. So
Right.
which I think is part of the magic of it. I mean, I love.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's like the mythos of comics behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I try to make that my speciality. I love that stuff because you can
tell.
Yeah. So yeah.
I can tell you love that stuff. That's awesome, though. I delved into that stuff a little bit on the Marvel side, but you definitely are. You really know a lot about the history of comics behind the comics. The writers and artists. I love that about you.
Well, I appreciate it, man. But what I'm going to tell everybody right now, since we're on Batman, and I'll shut up about it, the greatest behind-the-scenes comic story ever, and you can find it on YouTube from the man himself, is Jim Steranko telling the story of why he slapped the taste out of Bob Kane's mouth.
I think I've heard that he hit him before, but I don't remember why.
Oh, it's worth watching. I mean, it's Jim Steranko is at a comic book convention telling the story, and I'm like, that was awesome. I mean, Jim Steranko comes from the days of I'm going blank. The 50s with you wore suit and ties and all this. Oh my God, I'm going the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack. He's from the days of the Rat Pack.
And he was a magician, right? Before he got into comics.
Oh, he was a little bit of everything. Carnival barker, escape artist. Mr. Miracle was based on Jim Steranko because Jack Kirby took him under his wing a little bit, showed him a few tricks, and Steranko finally took off.
Well, his art on Nick Fury's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. is love the one of my favorite covers on that run is the Salvador Dali
Yeah.
replica cover, like he with the melting clocks and stuff. I love that. I actually saw that. I was in Oregon. Had some weird. We stopped in to get some coffee, and then I went to this weird store that had a lot of weird different types of collectibles, and they had a copy of that issue framed.
Yeah.
And I thought about buying it, but it was really expensive.
Well,
I was like, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I met Strenko a few years ago at Heroes Con, and I've actually got the Agents of Shield #4 signed. That's the one with Nick Fury on the cover, pointing a gun at you, and you got this pop art behind him of the Statue of Liberty and the swirls. He signed that for me, and I talked to him briefly, and the man definitely knows he's a legend, and I think he wears a wig, and he's tiny. And even though he's tiny, he puts out a very big aura. If you get what I'm saying, you know.
Yeah.
And I love all these guys and stuff, but I'm not above being critical. You know what I mean? It's all out of respect, nothing personal. You know, so yeah.
He says he had the largest influence on comics with the fewest issues. So.
Well, you know what? Every man needs a dream, and if that's what gets him through the day.
But his art is great, and it definitely worked for Nick Fury.
Yeah.
How much DC work did he do?
I have a Superman #400 where he did a phenomenal short story in it. That's the only thing I can think of. It seems like I've seen a sketch here and there. I definitely have to look that up. Steranko really didn't do that many comics for Marvel to begin with.
Yeah, right. I think it's only like a 12, 15 issue run.
Yeah, but he was so innovative in that short amount of run. He came up with, somebody counted it up one time, and I've heard he's come up with 40 new ways of telling stories in comics or more or something. And he was at Charlton Comics before that doing a character that was a spy book that was very Nick Fury like, you know. He kind of came over with that Victor Gerardo and a bunch of those guys that were at Charlton Comics. So, yeah. And when he got to, let me slow down. He went to Marvel, and Jack Kirby supposedly showed him a few things. And I've heard other stories, but we're on a live podcast, and I don't want to put any misinformation out there. But I'm sitting here remembering, and I hope I don't get like Tourette's in 20 minutes going, and he worked with this guy,
No, it's cool, man. We always say on this podcast, we make mistakes. Sometimes we remember things the wrong way. I've said things that I'm like, I'll go back and I'll listen to it. I'll be like, oh, that's totally wrong. I totally messed that up. It happens. It happens. We've all done it on this show. But yeah, to get into the Justice League of America first issue, they've already become a team at this point. Obviously, like I mentioned before, this is not the issue where they come together. They are being challenged by a villain named Despero.
Yeah.
He's from a alien dimension, and I really love the way that this guy looks. I love the third eye on his forehead. He almost has like a fish scale fin thing around his head. He's got like a pink purplish coloring, and I really like the design of the character, the villain. I don't know, is this guy you might know, does he like resurface a lot as a villain of the Justice League, or is he just kind of?
Well, the most popular one is they really went the other way with the character, because I love the look. He's got like the Savage Dragon fin on his head, but it's sideways.
Savage Dragon, that's it.
And he's pink and all this stuff, and he's of his era, and I can't be objective about him. I love him the way he was, but in the 80s. Towards the end of the Justice League Detroit era, right before Crisis hit, he went through some kind of spiritual religious ceremony, and he came out and they turned it into a mohawk. They turned it around, and he became like the Hulk. He got all big.
Ripped and muscly.
Yeah, and he's popped up a few times, and he popped up there towards the end of Justice League Detroit era. Legends happened, and they brought back the Giffen DeMantis Justice League. That was funny, and to make it freaking serious, in the 30s of that book, about 3 years into the book, they brought him down, and he started messing up people left and right. It was Doomsday before Doomsday. with
So
what they do.
but he becomes like kind of a brutish villain
Yeah.
instead of like a cerebral.
I,
I'm gonna outthink you type villain.
Yeah, and I called him Space Hulk. I'm going by memory here, and they brought him back once or twice before. I don't know how smart he is. I don't know how much that bruteness came, but he became a very physical fighter instead of the little cerebral assassin that he was in that book.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So yeah. So the story kind of starts off with uh, Barry Allen driving his convertible past the farm. And
Yeah,
this blue aura kind of like comes down.
he was like, it came from that house. I'm gonna knock on this. I'm gonna be a complete stranger. No reason why he's on the road.
He basically pulls over and
Yeah.
puts on his costume and goes to investigate.
Yeah. Oh, there's a blue light. And he goes to a farmhouse, a complete stranger. Back then, if a stranger came to the door, you would be met with a shotgun, But I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
No, that's fine. You're right. I mean, dude, I don't know if you listen to any of our retro Marvel stuff, but we crack jokes left and right. I mean, we love the stuff, but we make fun of it at the same time. It's just a lot of
Yeah.
it's a good laugh. I mean, yeah. But, anyway, when the Flash gets inside the house, he encounters two alien beings. They have pink skin, green hair, pointy elf ears, arched eyebrows. I like the design of the female character actually.
hmm
Looks really cool. But yeah, so basically they're there on Earth. They've escaped from Despero, who's trying to take over their planet, I think, and they're trying to come up with a weapon. I think what did they call it? The anti.
Oh no, this is the one I skimmed through, man. Because after reading all those
Okay.
books, Gardner, like I said, I'm giving him credit. Gardner Fox put a lot of story in there, but
I
after,
can say this is better than a lot of this
yes, decompressed.
campy Jack Kirby stuff I've read
Yeah,
from the early Marvel stuff. The story makes a lot more sense, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's still a lot of that corny stuff in here where he just pulls over to check out this weird
Oh.
house, but
oh yeah, I'm going back to read it. I just can't read it with this big stack of books, man,
Well,
because you got to
basically,
take your time with it. Yeah.
yeah, they're definitely developing some sort of weapon that can defeat this Despero guy on their Earth or on their planet. And the Flash says he's going to help them out because that's what the Justice League does. They help Earth, so why not help another dimensional world? So he signals his Justice League members, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Superman, Batman, Aquaman, and they're all kind of like on their own little adventures when they get the call. So we see Wonder Woman saving the Statue of Liberty from like a lightning bolt strike, and
Yeah. She's got to be patriotic. Let's keep the theme. It's like a Raymond Chandler novel, man. It's like you're the reader. You go into all these different worlds of people's. You're just like going through all these worlds, and yeah.
So a Martian Manhunter is he like a cop in his alter human ego?
John Jones became a detective.
Detective.
Yeah, shape-shifting detective. A little theory that people have talked about, so that I've heard since the early 80s, I mean, even at 9 or 10, John Jones was supposed to have been a straight-out Superman clone, and Green Arrow and Speedy were so close to Batman that they put them in Brave and Bold, thinking that they could make money off of them and not overexpose Superman and Batman and Robin.
Interesting.
So to have them in the league and be side by side with these guys historically is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but he was a detective. They film and war kind of detectives, kind of what they were sort of going through, but it turned more into like 50s cop show is what some of those stories felt like to me. Yeah.
Did he have his own title, or was he just in Brave and the Bold?
Oh my God, I want to say it was Brave and the Bold. There was no Martian Manhunter title in the 50s that I'm aware of, 50s or 60s.
Okay.
He was
I
in.
think
He was.
I don't know much about the character, but he's very interesting to me. I do like him.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what it was. Could it have been World's Finest? Oh, I don't know, man. You got me.
Yeah. Anyway, then we see Green Lantern. He's like, he's saving houses from a dam that's collapsed, and Superman is at the Daily Planet. He's rushing off, and one of these characters that well, we'll get into it later. But and then Batman and Superman or Aquaman are teaming up to take on some pirates, I guess, smugglers on the high seas. So all of a sudden, Despero, I guess, is able to locate where these two fellow aliens are on Earth. And he's able to like teleport them back to his planet, and for some reason the Flash and the male alien are not affected, but the female is taken. So they use a spaceship to go to their dimension and encounter, and that's where they encounter Despero. And I guess he had kidnapped Despero had kidnapped the other Justice League members. So, and then they get into this weird this weird game where the Flash has to. It's almost like it's a chessboard with a bunch of figurines that look like the Justice League members.
Yeah.
And he has to move them to a square on the board, and if he pulls a card that has the same number as the numbered square on the board, then that Justice League member gets teleported to a distant planet, another dimension where they're probably gonna die.
To be exiled. And
Exile,
see,
yeah.
and to me, a lot of these comic book writers, Gardner Fox, he wrote sci-fi novels and stuff. Gardner Fox was just an amazing writer back in the day. To me, our equivalent of Gardner Fox for the 40s, 50s, and 60s and stuff would be Grant Morrison, in my opinion. Okay. So to me, he was their Grant Morrison because he was pulling for stuff. When I was when I read that first Justice League #1 in reprint, like I was telling you about, that cover I would just kind of stare at. The cover of it has all the Justice League members sitting around a table and they're playing the chess game. And then when I was like actually reading the book, it really made me feel like that old black and white Swedish movie where the man is playing a game of chess with death. I mean, we're talking about a simple silver. The Justice League #1 was an event. All these heroes are together. Everybody's like, oh my god, even though they kind of feel exchangeable as characters. And the book doesn't transition very well from scene to scene, but that didn't matter back then. People wanted their story, get it moving. It was fast paced.
Yeah.
But every now and then, these writers, to me, would put in a little bit of substance there. That because they're freaking writers, they want to put something in there. That's how it comes off to me. So that chess game to me is actually more amazing than some of them getting kidnapped and everything.
Right. Yeah. The chess game is a really cool element, and I love what Despero does because he has like psychic abilities, I guess.
Yeah, that third eye. Yeah, I think he was. Yeah.
Right. He uses that third eye against the Flash, and even though he's pulling cards that don't match where he's moved the figurine.
Right.
He's using his psychic powers to manipulate his mind to see that same number that he moved the figurine, and so he's losing every time, and the odds are in his favor. He totally thinks in the beginning that he has the advantage.
Right.
And every Justice League member ends up, getting exiled, and he can't figure out why he's losing. And I don't know if he ever figures it out, actually.
Well, again, those older stories are more morality stories. I mean, I get existential a little bit on this stuff. That's why I'm saying rein me in. They're more morality stories than anything.
Right.
Despero thinks he's, it's one of the, you could think of the 7 deadly sins, pride. Despero thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and and he ends up being his own worst enemy.
Oh my god, that makes me think of this hilarious recent issue of the Inhumans.
Okay, that's out of left field. I love that.
Way out of left field, but Black Bolt has him and Medusa have separated, and he owns this jazz nightclub now.
Yeah.
For Inhumans, where it's like a sanctuary safe place for Inhumans to go, basically, and just be social. And but other people go there too. And it's two really old school Marvel villains that think they're the smartest guys in the room. Trying to remember it, like it wasn't. Was it the Mad Tinker? No, it's
The Mad Thinker.
the Mad Thinker, and
Oh, what was his square-headed robot called?
I know he's been hanging out in Spider-Man.
What's funny is I knew it until like a half a second before I said it. Yeah, Awesome Android.
Oh, okay, no, it's not the same one that I'm thinking of, but yeah,
I could be
yeah,
wrong. Yeah.
the Mad Thinker, and it's like another one of those real like Brainiac, Reed Richards type villains, and they're playing poker, and they get into this heated altercation, and one of them ends up setting off this bomb that has to be neutralized with like some sort of complicated code. And the Mad Thinker is trying to figure it out, and everyone's freaking out, like blackballed all the Inhumans. It's just a really great story and scene. It's one of the better recent Inhuman issues that Marvel's put out. But it just kind of reminded me of that. I wish I could think of who the other character was, but
What's up, everybody?
really funny
It's
stuff.
Matt, Comic
But,
Order.
so yeah, to get back to Justice League, the story ends up going into more action, as Tim was talking about. We get Wonder Woman on like on a dinosaur planet, kind of like Marvel's.
Dinosaur Island.
Not Dinosaur Island's on.
I see. See, yeah, Monster Island from the Mole Man. No, wait.
Marvel has the Savage Land.
Y'all,
very
yeah,
Savage
yeah. Well played.
World.
Well played, sir. Well played. Yes.
I'm sorry, listeners. I've been on midnight shift for a year and a half. My brain is not as sharp as it used to be.
No, I was completely. No, I've got a whole set of the '80s Kazar series, and I'm completely. The Savage Land did not enter my head at all. Well played. I'd give you a cookie. You know.
But so she's trying to get escape from all these Tyrannosaurus Rex type dinosaurs, and gets picked up by a pterodactyl, and Superman has to swoop in and save her. Although she's doing a pretty good job handling herself. So, and then we get to a point where they're trying to scale a cliff, and then Superman all of a sudden starts getting really weak, and there's just this big giant rock of kryptonite just sitting on this ledge of this mountain.
Yeah, don't you hate that when you're happen? You just walk down the street and there's some kryptonite laying there. God.
The largest lump of kryptonite I've ever seen in a comic book. It is like the size of a boulder. But anyways, Wonder Woman picks it up and uses her super amazing strength to hurl it away from Superman, and he recovers, and then he uses his X-ray vision, or his extremely strong vision, to spot who was it? Was it Batman? On a distant planet in the same solar system.
That telescopic vision comes in handy, man.
Telescopic vision. That was it. Thank you. so he grabs Wonder Woman. They fly off to meet them. Then the book cuts to Green Lantern and Aquaman. They're on a complete water world, which is super convenient for Aquaman. But there's like this giant. It almost looks like, like I'm sure everyone's seen the picture of like a kid holding an hourglass over some ants. It's like this weird floating hourglass thing that's like amplifying the star.
Was it a magnifying glass?
It looks kind of like a magnifying glass. That's what I got from it. It was almost like it was magnifying the sun and firing like a beam of sunlight into the ocean, and like causing it to heat up to the point where it was going to boil and like kill them and all the life on the planet. So,
man, that is so evil. I'm like, that's that's when you're proud to be evil. Like I'm going to act like a little kid with ants, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
because I'm evil, you know.
We got Green Lantern like creating icebergs with his ring. I don't know if it'd be cold, but it was interesting. So he's trying to cool off the ocean, and then eventually they're able to destroy the magnifying glass, and Green Lantern uses his ring to. There's this crazy scene where all like the sea creatures. He uses his ring to like carry the sea creatures onto the magnifying glass. They're squids, and that's what they do to destroy it. The squids like spray their ink, and the thing is it was weak. It was yellow, right? So it was weakening. Green Lantern couldn't destroy this magnifying glass thing because it was like this yellow light. So none of his attacks were making any headway on it. So the squids cover it in black ink, and then they're able to destroy it and get off the planet. So it was an interesting way to get out of that predicament.
I would have called that chapter 8 arms to hold me, you know. So